Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Willamette Falls. It is good to be together. Called me last night and said, "So, are you having church tomorrow?" And I said, "Of course we're having church tomorrow. We always have church." And he said, "Oh." And we chatted, and then I said, "Oh, wait a minute. Did you mean, are we opening the building?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "No. We always have church. We have been having church all along. But the church is the people and not the building. I want to open the building as much as everyone else does, but only when it is safe. And right now, it feels a little bit like when the Supreme Court threw out the provisions of the Voting Rights Act because the laws that they had put in place to make sure that everyone had the right to vote were working so well that it seemed like people could vote safely. You don't stop the rules that are making sure everything is just and safe and fair because the rules are working. And I understand that we need to open things up a little bit. There is this gray area here, and we all need to get life a little bit more back to normal. But 150 people in church singing together and worshiping together is not the safe way to do that. And so the church remains. The congregation remains, but the congregation remains online for now. I invite you to find a chalice or a candle to light with us as we acknowledge the fact that the church and the congregation are everywhere. I invite you to join us in our chalice lighting statement. Whoever you are, wherever or whatever you come from, you are welcome here, where we are invited into connection and inspired to spiritual growth. Let us leave this hour together, refreshed anew, ready to ignite action for justice in the wider world. Our opening words this morning are a prayer from Memorial Day by Barbara Peskin, who writes, "Bless the poets and those who mourn. Send peace for the soldiers who did not make the wars, but whose lives were consumed by them. Let strong trees grow above graves far from home. Breathe through the arms of their branches. The earth will swallow your tears while the dead sing, no more, never again. Remember me. For the wounded ones and those who received them back, let there be someone ready when the memories come. When the scars pull and the buried metal moves, and forgiveness for those of us who were not there for our ignorance. And in us, veterans in a forest of 1,000 fallen promises, let new leaves of protest grow on our stumps. Give us courage to answer the cry of humanity's pain. And with our bare hands, out of full hearts, with all our intelligence, let us create the peace. Come, let us worship together. I invite you to join us now in singing our opening hymn, Bring Many Names.
Bring many names, beautiful and good, celebrating us in glory, living, loving God. Hail and Hosanna, bring many names. O day King God, gray with endless care, calmly piercing evil's new disguises, glad of new surprises, wiser than despair. Hail and Hosanna, O day King God, young growing God, eager still to know, willing to be changed by what you've started, quick to be delighted, singing as you go. Hail and Hosanna, young growing God.
Our time for all ages this morning is a story by Aaron McEmrus called The Broken Flute. I invite the kids to come forward, cuddle up with their grown-ups around the screen as I tell you a story. So being hurt or sick is never fun, and being stuck in a hospital room can be really scary. But in many hospitals, there are ministers whose job is just to sit with people and visit, sometimes holding their hands, listening, just being there so they won't feel so scared or alone. A minister who works in a hospital is called a chaplain. Emily was a warm and grandmotherly type person who worked as a volunteer chaplain in a large hospital. She had rich brown eyes and big round plastic glasses that made her eyes look even bigger and kinder than they already were. Her husband had died many years ago, and since then she had comforted thousands of patients right there in the same hospital where her husband had once been a patient. One of Emily's favorite things to do was to play the recorder. She had lots of recorders. Some were made of wood and some were made of metal. Some were made of plastic. Some played high notes and others played lower. Some had crystal clear sound and others had softer, soothing sounds. She loved them all, but she did have one special favorite. Her favorite recorder was made of beautiful dark wood, which was faded and pale from where her fingers had held it over the years. It made the clearest, purest, most beautiful music of all of her recorders. And when she played it in the hospital, the notes echoed far and wide. She carried that recorder with her everywhere she went. When she went on a backpacking trip, Emily carried her favorite recorder in her pocket like she always did, but on the second night of her trip, she accidentally sat on it. She reached into her pocket, desperately hoping against hope that it would be okay, but it wasn't. Her favorite recorder had a terrible crack in it. She was so sad. But she kept the broken recorder. When she got back from her trip, she tried everything she could to fix it, but nothing worked. When Emily blew into it, no sound came out of it at all except the sound of her breath. All her friends said, "Come on, Emily. Can't you see it's ruined? You might as well just throw it away." But she kept it anyway. She continued to carry it around with her, even though it couldn't make music anymore. One day, she was visiting a patient who also played flutes and recorders, and even made his own. Emily nervously said, "I know you aren't feeling very well these days, but maybe you can help me?" And she pulled out the broken recorder, She said, I was so stupid, I accidentally sat on it and it broke. Is there anything you can think of that might fix it? It's very special to me. He examined it. He said, well, this is a bad crack. Let's see what we can do. And they sat side by side on the edge of his bed as he patiently tried to repair the instrument. When they were through, she held the recorder eagerly to her lips, ready for the music to flow. But nothing happened. The silence was deafening. Emily's eyes filled with disappointed tears. Thanks anyway, she said to the patient, who looked apologetically into her eyes and shrugged, then lay back in his bed for a rest. But after that, Emily still carried the recorder with her everywhere she went. Sometimes she felt compelled to pull it out and put it to her lips just in case some magic might have happened to bring the instrument back to life. And one day, when she blew into that recorder, the most beautiful, quiet, warm tone that she had ever heard came out of it. The music that came out of that miraculous old recorder had changed. Its voice was quieter now. It had mellowed from the clear, ringing voice of its youth to a sound like soft words or a gentle lullaby. Emily soon realized that this new sound fit the hospital perfectly. One day, as she went on her rounds, she was surprised to see that the old musician who had helped her fix the recorder was back in the hospital again. He was very sick. I'm so glad to see you again, said Emily, and said, wait, that's not quite what I meant. I'm sorry you're sick, but I have to show you my recorder. It works. And the old man smiled and said, let me see. And Emily drew the instrument out of her pocket and handed it to him. And he took his sensitive, wrinkled hands all over the wood, tracing the scar where the crack had been. And his eyes smiled. He said, we couldn't heal this break on our own, could we? But I see now what happened. The seasons changed. What do changing seasons have to do with it? Emily said. As the wood got wetter and drier and warmer and cooler with time, it expanded, and the gradual swelling mended the crack. And you were patient and loyal and loving enough to let that happen on its own. Looking at her with his tired brown eyes, he handed the recorder back to Emily. He asked in a weary but satisfied voice, will you play for me? With grateful tears welling up in her eyes, she began to play, and the music that came from her favorite flute was soft and pure and beautiful. As the music filled that cold room to overflowing, even the busiest nurses passing by the doorway outside paused to listen. When she finished her song, he sighed contentedly. Sometimes, Emily, it's the broken instruments that have the best sound, he said to her. And she knew that he was right. Now is the time in our service where we remind you that you are welcome to contribute to the work of this community by mailing in a check or by going to our website and scrolling down to the donate button, which is yellow. We have joys and sorrows today. I'm pleased to report we have more joys than sorrows today. If you haven't sent one in to me already, you are welcome to put something into the chat. First, our sorrow is that John and Joan Young are sending love to their former exchange student, Scott from New Zealand, whose mother Jan died suddenly of a brain aneurysm yesterday. Chuck Smith has a joy that John and Joan Young, whose names are repeated several times in this Joys and Sorrows portion today, brought biscuits and gravy to them this morning. So that was fun. Joan and John also report that their dog Avery got her stitches out and is healing wonderfully and is almost back to her old self, which is a blessing indeed. They are grateful also for Malcolm and Ann Hamilton, who have on their own connected with an acquaintance in Monument Valley, New Mexico, found out what the needs were of the hard-hit and poorly supported Navajo Nation in that area, and collected and then sent a mass of supplies to them. Thank you, Malcolm and Ann. And they also are grateful for our dear Reverend Marcia, who just keeps on keeping on and keeps us keeping on. Thank you. For Malcolm and Ann, for Avery, for Joan and John. Oh, shoot. Kate Fassett's dad was hospitalized on Monday with a foot infection that was thought originally to be COVID, but he is recovering and was discharged after foot surgery. That is good. Sakaya has a joy that she doesn't have to go to school right now. The other joys that I have are that Karen and Kirby Griffin report great joy in having a brand new great-grandson named Ezra, born May 20th in Georgia to their granddaughter Christina. Sadly, in these days of the virus and limited travel, it looks like they won't have the opportunity to hold and snuggle him for quite a while, but just the knowledge of this healthy new little life in the world is very moving. And finally, unless I see more in the chat, Kate Jaspers and Kristen Stevenson report with joy that Eleanor turned 6 years old on Saturday and that Silas will turn 4 on Thursday. And I think that we should sing. So if Eleanor and Silas are around, I think we should sing. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Eleanor and Silas. Happy birthday to you. One for Eleanor and one for Silas. And then, as we do in our religious education classes, we don't just leave the stones alone. Though I will add one more for all of those joys and sorrows that remain in the silence of our hearts. And I will pour water on the stones, representing the community that holds our joys and sorrows. We are surrounded in care. We are surrounded in love. We are surrounded in community, and it is so very good. Will you pray with me? Spirit of life and love, for all that is our lives, we sing our thanks and praise. For the joys of new life and young life marking milestones, spending time with families, just enjoying each other. For the joy of technology, which lets us at least see pictures of these new babies that we welcome into the world, even though we don't get to snuggle them as much as we would like. For the mixed blessings of foot surgeries and shingles that are better than the sometimes scarier realities. For the community and the congregation that is the people and not the building. For all that is our lives. And for all that have given their lives, which we mark this Memorial Day weekend. Blessed be, and amen. Now, I am so pleased to welcome Brendan Swoggor to preach our sermon this morning.
Good morning, everybody. We begin with a quote from Ella Yillick O'Connor. I found a note in my phone from November which said, I eat a grief sandwich, I wear a grief coat, I see a grief film. It's a cloudy and chilly day in Oregon, the bright and warm blue of spring now covered in gray, wind and rain. This kind of weather tends to bring my energy to a standstill, where the warmth of sun and clear skies energizes me, makes me feel like maybe there's still life out there somewhere amongst all this. This socked-in feeling of damp cold pushes me to retreat under covers and soak in my own thoughts. And with the world in its current state, our own thoughts are often what we wish most to escape. It is day 66 of the statewide shutdown, week 10 of remaining indoors, month 3 of trying to stay safe. In the beginning of March, everything seemed normal. I was attending classes 5 days a week, traveling to and from campus, spending time with friends, living on my own for the first time. On the first weekend of the month, I caught a Bolt bus to Eugene, the vehicle packed with friends and families traveling for the weekend, strangers gathered together in close quarters, a thing that seems so foreign today. My weekend away was spent with my best friend, Emma, a senior student at the University of Oregon. We wandered the town, went to the mall, ate in food courts, and even capped the evening with a concert. Hundreds of people dancing, singing, sweating together in one room. Life was normal. And for us, despite being surrounded by hundreds or thousands of people throughout the day, it was just about us two. We spent that time thinking that all we would hold on to would be the company of each other, not the extras, the background characters, the other people who seemed to slip past our field of vision. In the midst of the day's conversation, I first heard of the virus. Perhaps I had heard it prior, but any previous mention had been waved off, out of sight and out of mind. It hadn't fully registered until that day. She told me that there was a rumor that the school might shut down. She didn't know the validity of the claim. It was only whispers. But it was only a few days later when those whispers became grounded reality. The situation set in, and the University of Oregon was going online. This was a massive leap, a change that sent students spiraling, especially seniors like my friend. What would become of the year? What would become of graduation? How long would it last? All these questions were not being answered because no one knew. At my own school, Pacific University, as an editor for our student paper, we chased these answers. A health professor who specialized in epidemiology told me he highly doubted our school would shut down, a mere 24 hours before our administration announced the rest of our term would be online. And another 24 hours later, all students were told to evacuate and leave campus for home. And there we sat, suddenly, once together, only days later, all apart in our own separate cities, some separate states. That first week was the very worst. Grief surrounds us no matter what. This time of year, Memorial Day, often brings grief under any other circumstance, as many may grieve for a lost loved one and spend time with family to remember them. But this year brings a different kind of grief for the world, a grief of lost time and lost opportunity. In those first weeks, after my apartment was packed up and I was once again back in my childhood bedroom in my parents' home, my mind turned to all the things I had just left behind. Independence, a new home, new friends, and a new community I had just begun to feel a part of. All of it gone within a week. My mind, too, turned to the uncertainty of the road ahead. I grieved over the things that once kept me looking forward to what was to come. That rug was pulled out from underneath me. Planned summer vacations, gone. Time with friends, gone. Wrestling with it all as it grew and mounted and mutated with every consecutive news alert on my phone was undeniably difficult. Those first weeks, I tried my best to cope. I forced myself to get dressed every day. I rearranged my room, bought a new bed, created a space that felt fresh and new. I went on walks when the weather wasn't torrential. I even broke out my bike a few times. But as grief always seems to do, no matter how hard I tried to outrun it or distract myself with just one more episode of Game of Thrones, it always found its way to me. In everything I did, the thought of this virus, this invisible specter that now surrounded and dictated the entire world, had full dominion over every thought. I was scared. Not only did I grieve lost opportunities, but it actively frightened me. Would we be safe? How much would we lose? And how long will it last? And even now, 3 months, 10 weeks, 66 days later, these questions remain unanswered. But in order for us to truly understand the situation we are in order to grapple with it, grief is necessary. Because if there wasn't grief, if there wasn't darkness, or worry, or fear of any kind, there would be no light to guide us to the end. Grief is the first step to acceptance and a better reality. And no matter how hard we try to outrun it or distract ourselves, what we really must do before anything else is the hard thing. We must feel the weight of the world we are in, but know that you're not alone. We share this weight. We share this burden. Acknowledge it, accept it, and together we can take the first step. And now is the time in our service for the Doxology, voice still and small. Allison will lead us in singing.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years singing.
We begin again with a quote from Ella Yulek O'Connor. As I get older, I realize there's something to be said for the pleasant feeling of waiting. I get this feeling when I make bread, or put my seedlings in after the last frost, or even when I wait for a particular package to arrive. Waiting, the thing that felt so pointless and annoying when I was young, is now a kind of delicious activity. It is day 66, week 10, month 3 of all of this. Somehow, these weeks have gone by faster than expected. Then again, in many ways, it feels like time drags on. Those first weeks of it all were the very worst. The times when nothing, no matter how hard I tried, could take what was going on in the world off my mind. Everything was soaked in a grief of lost time, a grief for those even more heavily affected. My senior friends who could no longer graduate in person, small business owners who can no longer afford to keep their doors open, and the hundreds, now hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their lives. In those weeks, it all loomed above me. It seemed to loom above everyone. Talking to my friends on a Zoom call, the new way of any sort of gathering these days, as evidenced by what we are doing right now, it seemed that everyone was in the same state of mind. We were all scared, and we were all stressed. There were so many unknowns and unanswered questions, and we were all grieving. But what was there to do? As much as we wanted it, and still want it, all to be over, to close our eyes tight and count to 3 and open them, and it was all just a dream, we can't. And that's the sad reality of it. This is Mother Nature. This is something bigger than us. This isn't something we can go out and fight with our fists. Even those on the front lines, the doctors, the nurses, the scientists, they admit this isn't going to be over soon. We will be in this for a while. So what is there to do? But wait. It seems strange that the answer may be so simple, yet so difficult. We are a people of activity. We are a people built on impatience. We want to go out, move, go, never stop, have it now. But it's our movement and our pacing and our never ever stopping no matter what that got us here. Forced to stop, forced to stay, and forced to wait. The reality is, it is the waiting that will save us. And this is the greatest test of our collective patience as a species. In order to survive, we must go against our instinct. We must stop, and we must breathe. This has been easier said than done. I'm introverted by nature, and after spending a lot of time out and about, interacting with people in the world, I often find that I must retreat in order to recharge and reflect. With this in mind, I thought that staying at home and social distancing would be less of a challenge. But after so much of this, so long away from the world, I find that I crave and appreciate that interaction more and more. Those moments where all the rest of the world, those background characters and extras in a crowd, seem to simply slip past with no mind, it seems so precious to me now. Yes, I would love to go and see the world and my friends and my family again. I think we all want that more than anything at the moment. But we must have patience. We must be still for just a while longer, because the more we sit, the more we wait, the more patience we have, the better the reward. And patience is difficult, especially when there are so many moving parts to this situation. Many people feel that this patience and this waiting is doing more harm than good. And I can sympathize with where they're coming from. It's a hard thing to do, waiting. When we see the world crumbling around us, we worry for what might come. We worry for the economy. We worry for the state of everything. What will be left when this is truly, truly through? Many people want to just get on with it. The consequence can't be that bad, right? The numbers are slowing. Can't we please just go back to the way things were? But we must recognize the consequence of such impatience. Because with any wrong move, any premature decision, more grief and loss is sure to follow. So, we sit. 3 months, 10 weeks, 66 days later, we sit and still we wait. Because what we are in is a game of patience, a situation which calls for us to collectively stand still as the dust settles around us. And it will hurt. It will not be easy. Nothing like this ever is. But we will survive. We will prevail because that's what we've done and we will do again. As long as we stick together, as long as we have patience. If we just breathe and sit and stay and hold on, there's hope to be found in even the darkest of times. A poem from Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never, in extremity, it asked a crumb of me. Oregon weather is strange. We've all come to know it well, and any native knows that even on the cloudiest days, the darkest and dreariest, soaked in rain, even if it seems like there's no break, the sun is always lurking, and just as quickly as the rain began, it could stop, and there would be light. I was taking a walk the other day, doing my best to practice my patience, practice my breathing, and appreciate what there was in that moment. I was trying my best, as we all are, to stay sane. When I began the walk, it was cloudy and dreary. A light rain misted my face, and I pulled up the hood of my jacket to try and stay warm and dry just as much as I could. It wasn't pleasant, but I was happy to do it if it meant I could get out and breathe and stretch my legs. And as I continued to walk, eyes on the ground in front of me, I felt a warmth hit my back. This warmth soon took over, and suddenly the rain stopped. Sunlight flooded the road ahead of me, and when I looked up, what once was a solid sky of gray shone bright blue. It is the small things in life that have the most beauty these days. I stopped where I was, breathed in a fresh breath, and took off my jacket to soak in the new warmth of the air around me. And though this was a simple thing, a small change in weather that we perhaps have come to expect of Oregon, in that moment, it felt like so much more. We are in a storm, and as we look around us, it may seem that there is no break, no end in sight. Our energy may be feeling low. We may be feeling like there is no blue, only gray and rain and grief that surrounds us. But behind it all, we must remember that there is a bright light just waiting to break through, as long as we wait out the storm. There is hope within everything, and there is hope within each of us. If there is even a small piece of you that is feeling okay right now, grab on and hold on to it. Hold on to that light, and hold on to that hope. Though we may be apart, we are more together than ever. We are all facing these challenges together. In order to overcome them, we must stand together. We must grieve together. We must wait together. And we must hope together. Wherever you are, take this time to breathe. Take this time to grieve what we've lost and what we may lose. Acknowledge this. Accept this. Allow yourself to feel the weight. But wait. Stay. Be patient. Stop and take in the small beauties. The people you are blessed to be with right now, books you might be reading, TV shows you're watching, time you have to yourself, anything. The way the sun breaks through the clouds on a rainy afternoon. We will be okay. I invite you now into the spirit of meditation Take this time to reflect on how you may be feeling, whatever weight you may be carrying, whatever small beauties and positivities there are to lighten your load. And most importantly, take this time to be still and breathe. Now, will you join us in singing our closing hymn, For All That Is Our Life? Once again, Alice will lead us in song.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build a common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build a common good and make our own days glad.
Will you now join me in the Chalice extinguishing statement? Grab your chalice. Marcia's healthy 6 feet away from me, and we'll extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. As we have gathered, so now we depart. And though we may not be physically together, this time has always been for gathering and reflection and community, despite the circumstances. We're all in this together, and we all must work together to get through it. Take time to yourself, breathe, be still, but check in on those around you. Call someone you love, help them carry the weight of it all. And most importantly, hold on to that light. Go forth in love, go forth in peace. Blessed be, and amen.